Yo, you're listening to Loughy and Savoca, a fantasy football podcast, episode 10. We're getting closer and closer to the regular season. Preseason almost over. It's been fun, though. Check out all the betting stuff over at Odd Shopper. But I'm Dave Loughran at Loughy_D on the Twitters, LOUGHY_D. Hit your boy up. And while you're there, follow Matt Savoca at Draftaholic. Man's putting out good info every day right here on this channel and everywhere else. What's happening, bro?
Hey, man, we are one day closer to football. You can feel it in the air. And yeah, the final week of the preseason underway as well. We've had some darlings this year, but I'm really excited for today's episode where we are focusing on the players we can hope we don't leave drafts without. Our most important players of the year.
How about Dameon Pierce, man? Dude looks good. I mean, I know he's had limited action, but Lovie Smith didn't even start him or play him in week 2. You got people on Twitter being like, oh, that's not good. No, it's very good if you like Dameon Pierce. It means that they've pretty much solidified him as the, he's chalked up as the, or cemented, I should say, as the starter. And he's averaging like 8 yards per carry in the preseason. The guys looked good, man.
Look, I'm scared because I put in the show sheet some prominent, and I mean very prominent names in the fantasy football industry saying they will not leave the 6th round without Dameon Pierce. I just want to say it. I just want to say that players like Royce Freeman have existed in the past. Players like Amir Abdullah have existed in the past. And if you played fantasy football for more than a few years, these were players that looked otherworldly in the preseason. They looked amazing all preseason long. And then they were propped up to 4th, sometimes 3rd round picks in fantasy drafts, and they fell on their face. Yes, sometimes this works out. Dameon Pierce looks fantastic. You cannot take that away from him. His per touch efficiency is insane. But this doesn't always work out. You still got veterans like Rex Burkhead who contributed well down the stretch. You got veteran coaches like Lovie Smith. I'm not saying to just get off the hype train. I just want to put some reservations on this thing, slow it down a little bit.
You know who else looked good in the preseason? Arian Foster. And remember what he went on to do. So goes both ways, Matt. I know you said that. You remember that? You remember that, though? Undrafted preseason.
And what was it, Steve Slayton? They wanted to make him the guy. And for 1 year. There
was Steve Slayton. Yep. But Arian Foster, when healthy, was an absolute monster. So, and hey, same team.
Serendipitous. All right. So the serendipity argument, I like it.
No, I get what you're saying. I mean, 6th round. Okay, so, and we're talking about must draft players today, or essentially guys that we don't want to leave drafts without. Now, that doesn't mean that you go and you draft them 3 rounds ahead of where they should be going, because then all you're doing is taking any perceived value away from them, right? Like if you're drafting a guy 3 rounds ahead of where his ADP is, you're saying that the average draft position, that everyone else is just an idiot, and that you are so much smarter than them, that this guy is going, dozens of picks below where he should be. Very likely not the case. And if you do believe that, you should get him a little earlier than his ADP because you're still getting value. But we'll talk about that. We'll talk about guys we're avoiding. I did want to start it off with Pierce, though, because I think it's going to be kind of a polarizing subject as we get even closer to draft season. It's like you said, 6th round, people are drafting him there. But I guess the best way for us to kind of diagnose this would be who else is being drafted right before and right after Pierce. So who do you think is going to be going in the same grouping, the same conversation as him, might make it easier for us to make a decision?
If he really gets bumped into this Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Miles Sanders, Ramondre Stevenson, Rashaad Penny tier, guys, that's a really tough ask for a possible timeshare running back on the Houston Texans. It's one thing to say, okay, this player has broken out within his own team, within his own scheme, and now he deserves playing time. It's another thing to say he's emerged to fantasy relevancy right away. I understand at the running back position, particularly with rookies, these things can come on fast. But if you're talking about, the running back 28, 29 in fantasy drafts, inside the top 30, the expected score in half PPR scoring from the running back 30, if you look at past ADP, it's like 9 to 10 fantasy points per game. That's a huge expectation. I don't know. That's still in the starter rounds for me. I guess in best ball, You can take some shots here on the upside of he turning into the next Arian Foster. But guys, I think we're ahead of our skis.
Miles Sanders on Underdog right now has an ADP of 91. So say what you want about him. I know he's down with a hammy right now. Rashaad Penny is 94 on Underdog. I'll take shots on those guys before Dameon Pierce, but
you have to.
I mean, obviously the injury concerns linger there, but Miles Sanders is on a team that actually we know has a functional offensive line, preeminent offensive line. It's good, right? And an offense that should function well, that should get into the red zone. We still have no idea if Davis Mills is just bad or not. I don't know. I like Dameon Pierce. I'm not reaching on Dameon Pierce at all. I'll take him.
You're not going to get him. You're not going to get him the rest of the summer if that's
fine,
because somebody's going to.
That's okay. I'm okay with that. I mean, look here. This is just to kind of put a bow on this. This is how I see it. If it means that I don't get Dameon Pierce on a team, and I'm pulling this up right now, you can look at the odds for the highest scoring team in the league this year. If I don't get Dameon Pierce on a team, yes, there you go. The Houston Texans that has the longest odds of all 32 teams, the longest odds, 250 to 1 to be the highest scoring team in the league this year. I think I'll sleep okay when my head hits the pillow.
There's just very few ways out, right? He has to get all the touches. The legendary running back seasons we've seen from running backs on terrible teams, it's because they got everything. Goal line work, passing game work, between the 20s work.
Saquon Barkley, rookie season, perfect example.
Can we guarantee that for this rookie player? They weren't even that bad. That team actually wasn't that bad. Odell and Eli especially. I mean.
All right, James Robinson.
It happens. Again, all his 2020 season, all the volume.
Yep.
He had all of the volume. And while it's possible that he just completely trucks Rex Burkhead and Marlon Mack and the rest of the bums over there, yes, it's possible, but you're saying that's definitely going to happen. Rashaad Penny was like RB1 overall in certain weeks, and he's going in that same spot.
Final 5 weeks of the season. Yeah. He had 130. He had 135 plus rushing yards in 4 of his last 5 games. Crazy.
Dude balled out.
All right.
And Russell wasn't good. Russell Wilson wasn't good during those weeks too.
No, I know. Okay, let's make this happen. So we're talking, and I think this is a good topic of conversation because we're getting into guys that you want to get. And the way you put it too is you're trying to get in every draft. If anyone tells you watch a videos, anyone's like, you have to get this guy. No, you don't. Like, if you're making a mistake, circling guys is not a mistake. Making an effort to get them to the point where you're just going crazy, not going to help you at all. One guy on your list is very interesting to me, Jalen Hurts, because as a passer last year was terrible, but as a runner he was fantastic. But you've been beating this drum all preseason, or all summer, I should say, that A.J. Brown can kind of transform this into a pass-heavy offense, not pass-heavy, but a more balanced offense. And if you've seen all the reports coming out on Devontae Smith, the guy just creates separation like it's his job, which it is.
So I am not the most prominent Matt or Matthew in the industry propping up Jalen Hurts as a my guy this year, unfortunately. That would be new Roto World's Matthew Berry talking up Jalen Hurts as his guy. And, it doesn't feel very original when that happens. But thank you for giving me some credit here because I have been talking about him throughout the offseason. And as I was doing one of my most recent videos on the Fantasy Football channel talking about how to take down your Superflex leagues, I realized there is this really unique tier of quarterbacks in fantasy drafts this year for Superflex or regular leagues where you still have quarterback 1 overall upside, a ton of it in terms of probability, but you don't have to pay the same draft capital. That's why we talk about Kyler Murray in the 5th round, but I really started looking at it, and that extends to the tier below. Jalen Hurts, and I will say Trey Lance as an honorable mention, but Jalen Hurts is the guy who really looks like that next Josh Allen to me, because the rush attempts are already going to be there. The rushing upside from a floor and ceiling, it's there. And then you use the same recipe that helped Josh Allen break into the superstar tier of the quarterback position by bringing in a superstar like A.J. Brown on the outside, This team is equipped to win right now. You talked about that offensive line. You talked about the secondary options in Devonta Smith and Dallas Goedert, and now you have that superstar piece to bring it all together. Hurts has never had a problem going deep. He was number 3 in the NFL in air yards per attempt. Now he's got someone to throw it deep to who's going to constantly create separation. I think it's just going to be magic this year. I think he's a steal in the usually like mid-7th, 8th round of single QB drafts.
Man, speaking of Trey Lance, he looked bad on Thursday night. Oof.
I'm all for it, man. He doesn't even have to be good because he could have that like Lamar Jackson-esque season. The team is expected to win now. They want to run the ball, and they would love to be underestimated going into the season.
I know it's just the preseason. I'm just saying, it was horrible. I don't know if you caught any of that game or not. Not great. Got blanked.
Yeah, didn't look great.
So one of the players that I'm targeting, and it feels like everybody's just out on him because there's been some questions at the offensive line. Leonard Fournette, though, is now going in the 3rd round, okay? Leonard Fournette has fallen in many – I'm using aggregate ADP right here. So, like, if you're just looking at underdog, 24th overall, on best ball 10s over at my fantasy leagues, he's going in the 3rd round. He's going at 29th on NFL.com. He's going late 2nd on Yahoo. I get that there are some concerns around Leonard Fournette, but last year before he was injured, okay, so he played through the first 14 weeks or 15 weeks. There were 14 games that he played. He led the league and he led all running backs in targets. He led all running backs in touchdowns, or I'm sorry, in receptions. He was top 6 in red zone carries and carries inside the 10. He was 18th among all positions in red zone targets. I mean, yeah, I get that the center position in the offensive line is banged up, but if you don't think they're going to find a way to fix that with Tom Brady under center, which every time Brady's ever been on the field, that's why he's only sustained one significant injury in his entire career.
Don't say it, yeah.
They find ways to protect him. And I get it. Like you got Rashaad White that they brought in before, and Leonard Fournette came back to Tampa Bay because Tom Brady called him and told him, like, get your ass back here. Literally said that. He said, what's your ass doing in New England? Because he was visiting the Patriots. He signed later that week. He was a bell cow last year in terms of opportunities per game. On the most pass-heavy team in the league that still had to feed Mike Evans and Chris Godwin and Rob Gronkowski and Antonio Brown for the half a season he played, Leonard Fournette still soaked up a ton of volume in the passing game, still was the leading rusher. 3rd round on Leonard Fournette. I don't care about the concerns right now. This team has the 2nd shortest odds to be the highest scoring team in the entire league this year. Why would I not want a piece of this offense in the 3rd?
How about we give a shout out to my favorite stat in the world? We should just have some like theme music for expected fantasy points at this point. Because if you look at Tom Brady's offense and you look at the positional rank of the opportunity, and what I mean by that, if you get the first most expected fantasy points, you're number 1. If you're 2nd, you're number 2. If you look at that, the number 2 player in expected fantasy points on Tom Brady's offense scores like most teams' number 1 option. The number 3 option scores like most teams' number 2 option. And I'm just talking about opportunity. I'm not even talking about the efficiency standpoint where constantly Tom Brady's options are outperforming their expectations. So not only do you have a larger pie, a significantly larger pie, but he doesn't even have to be 1st or even 2nd on his team in terms of opportunity value. That's why Leonard Fournette is an absolute smash at ADP. Honestly, this 2nd round, this year in fantasy drafts, some amazing running backs to the point where I love starting with a wide receiver because people get nervous, and then you just go anchor RB with one of these great 2nd rounders. I'm going to mention another soon.
I'm assuming it's Javonte Williams.
He's actually an honorable mention for me, but I love him. I just took him in an auction draft, paid up for him. The missed tackles force, looking like Jonathan Taylor on like half the touches, that's insane.
He had 3 fewer forced missed tackles on, I think, 129 fewer carries.
we're kind of done here. Second year player who looks that good, and who a team with very limited red zone opportunities found a way to make him top 15 in the NFL in red zone touches. That means they wanted him to score. Melvin Gordon said it himself. They want him to be the guy.
Yep.
And he doesn't quite make it as my must draft player. If you're in an auction like I was, go get both of these players. But for me, it's all about Saquon Barkley, man. I think he is a first rounder in second rounders clothing. I think essentially he is still that same 101, 102 pick that he was 2 years ago, with an ADP tamped down due to injury concerns. Why is Christian McCaffrey getting more of the benefit of the doubt? I guess it's because his legendary season was slightly earlier. I will posit and say that we have not seen a healthy Saquon Barkley except for 3 games in 2021 over the last 2 seasons. It was week 2 against Washington, week 3 against Atlanta, week 4 against New Orleans. He finally looked like himself, and he suffers another bad acute injury with that ankle roll in Dallas. And I think he comes back for solidarity with his team from week 11 on. He clearly wasn't himself, still cobbled together 4 double-digit fantasy point performances, but the fact that I kind of feel like we just haven't seen the best of him, and the understanding that this offense, as from a scheme standpoint, should improve. Barkley has no competition for touches, and if the offense just gets a little bit marginally better, the efficiency should improve as well. Great player, improved situation, no competition. That's a first-round pick in running back rules for me.
You are planning your flight. I mean, that is a hill you're willing to die on this year.
Yes.
Saquon Barkley. I like it. One guy that you have on the list and that I've had on the list all season, but I don't want to say I've soured on him. I do have a little bit of a concern, though, and that's Devin Singletary. A concern that even last week I did it. Phil, producing the show, said, I think I'd rather plant the flag on Saquon than Leonard Fournette. Yeah, I mean, sure, if you want a team that's bottom 5 in offense every year, but I get where Matt's coming from. I do. I do. And also, what's the disparity in ADP? 19. It's not too far. It's not too far. 19 and 25. Yeah, extensive checkered injury history and an offense that hasn't functioned in 2 decades, but I get it. I'm just busting your ball. Talk to me about Singletary, though, because you have the coaching staff now talking about, and I know coach speak, listen, take it with a grain of salt. Sometimes it matters. I feel like Zach Moss could get goal line work again. And that scares me. I'm less worried about, I'm less worried about James Cook than the fact that maybe we've completely eschewed the idea that Zach Moss could be at all used in this offense or at the goal line. Is he still their best goal line back is the question.
Oh, come on, man.
What?
Are you teeing me up for this to get riled up? I don't know.
I'm serious.
I think Zach Moss is a baseline level NFL player. I think that they have a great stable of running backs in Buffalo. No doubt about it. You draft James Cook almost as a luxury pick in the late second round. You got Duke Johnson on that roster playing special teams in preseason, by the way. I think his time has passed. I'm not going crazy here. But Devin Singletary, man, in the game against Denver, last week's preseason game, Devin Singletary was on the field for 100% of the plays with Josh Allen, led the team in opportunities during that time. Does the player who leads the team in opportunities for the Buffalo Bills interest you, especially in the 8th round of fantasy drafts? I don't get why this guy's going below the RB dead zone.
It obviously does. I've done like 8 videos on Devin Singletary already. I've been the biggest Devin Singletary fan since he came into the league and was ripping off 10-yard carries every time he touched the ball, but just wouldn't get work. So I hear you. I'm just throwing the hypothetical out there is all.
All right, that's very fair. And you know what? I pulled up a stat that I had used in one of our early matchups show over on the Stokastic DFS channel. Give us a follow over there, and we're starting up real soon with those Thursday matchup shows over there. We looked at players who are coming out of college had the best touchdowns per touch rate. And I regressed it to some mean using some fancy data science technique, creating a true touchdowns per touch rate. We talked about this. Since 2000, Devin Singletary at Florida Atlantic, the third best touchdown rate ever among mid-tier or top-tier school running backs in that category. Funnily enough, Antonio Gibson is number 4 on that list. Still, Singletary has proved himself as a touchdown scorer throughout his football playing career. I don't think the goal line opportunities go to just a guy in Zach Moss. James Cook is the one I'm worried about here, and obviously Josh Allen's rushing upside within the 5-yard line is something that could take away from Singletary, but the touch share and the opportunity share with the first team offense was all I needed to know. It's all systems go.
All right.
I gotta try. I gotta work on be as convincing as possible. I appreciate the healthy skepticism, but
I get it.
These flag plant plays. Got to go for it.
Or it just ends up being that Singletary's the 1 and that Moss is the 2 and Cook is the 3 this year.
I feel like after look at the game logs against bad rushing defenses when they didn't have to turn on the Jets offensively. Singletary was fantastic against Carolina last year. 16 fantasy points, number 7 in the NFL. Against New England, 18 fantasy points. They were doing their best to take away Josh Allen, number 10 amongst running backs. Against Atlanta, terrible rush defense, 23 fantasy points, number 5 in the NFL. They're fine giving it to him, even on this explosive offense.
And they should be. Devin Singletary's good. He's a good player. I'm all for it, man. And he was dominant over the final quarter of the season. The only reason he wasn't the RB1 over that span was Rashaad Penny. And that was the crazy thing. And I'm not going to – I've already driven this home. So I think Rashaad Penny at his ADP, you should continue to draft him. The Ken Walker injury, it went from Pete Carroll saying it's a little hernia thing to should be fine, get him ready for week 1. Then he undergoes a procedure. They say it's not a hernia thing. Then it is a hernia, and there's no timetable for his return yet. Rashaad Penny signed a 1-year deal. They probably run him till the wheels fall off on a bad team. I mean, give me all of a number 1, a starting back that I can get that we know when. And look, of course, the caveat is that he's been injured more than he's been healthy. But at his ADP, if it turns out that he gets hurt and Ken Walker takes over and Rashaad Penny's season is once again prematurely cut short, it's not going to lose your leagues for you. You're not missing on an 8th round pick or not getting a full season from an 8th round pick is not going to lose your leagues for you at all. Like if you're worried about injuries, then you're not if you're worried about injuries with Penny, then you're not drafting Christian McCaffrey 2nd overall.
Hey guys, if you haven't heard about Underdog Fantasy yet, you are missing out. It is truly the best place to play fantasy football, and best ball fantasy football is a great twist on our favorite game. No waiver wires, no transactions, no trades. You just draft a team and win big prizes. And at Underdog, they've had so many great tournaments all off season long. The puppy drafts, that's just $5 entries. The Pomeranian drafts, just $3 entries. And the Best Ball Mania tournament, which has 3 different opportunities to win $1 million. And we've got a great offer for you over at Stokastic. If you use promo code Stokastic, STOKASTIC, you will get a first match deposit bonus over at Underdog up to $100. And the gifts don't stop there. At Stokastic, we'll give you the free best ball rankings and draft kit, including our fantasy football rankings for all platforms and scoring. Absolutely free. A $70 value, absolutely free with promo code Stokastic. Here's the only concern I'll say about Rashaad Penny. Again, the price is right, but the consistency from year to year is not there in the sense that the quarterback has changed over. The level of play offensively is going to look very different this year. Just the style of offense may stay similar and the opportunities may stay the same, but it's going to have to be on Penny to remain efficient in order to be fantasy viable week after week.
Very little risk, though.
Definitely.
Very little risk. Not a ton of risk with Singletary either, quite frankly. I mean, that's why these guys are really appealing to me. And like I said, if Miles Sanders, you want to talk about must draft for me, if Miles Sanders is going to fall to the 8th round because of all of this fear and uncertainty, I'll happily grab that too. I just I can't stress this enough. That you have to put preconceived notions behind to the side sometimes. You have to, and look, this is not about me saying I'm going to die on the Miles Sanders hill until he's out of the league. I'll keep recommending him. No, because this year you're getting him in like the late 7th right now. That's crazy to me, or the 8th round in some spots. If I go, all right, I know all of this is in his favor, and I'm only mentioning this because we're talking about later round running backs, like late single-digit round running backs. If nobody wants to draft the guy because of the hammy or because they think it's going to be Gainwell or Boston Scott, and they just want nothing to do with him, that just means he's going to continue to slide further down the draft board. And the risk that you take in drafting a guy who averages 5 yards per carry for his career and has the 3rd most scrimmage yards this far into his season as any Eagle in history at the running back position, despite missing a lot of games, the upside is so immense that it minimizes the downside if you're drafting him at 81st overall or 80th overall, 91 overall on Underdog right now. I'll take that all day long.
We are getting you a Miles Sanders jersey if he becomes a league winner.
You've
been talking.
I feel about him the same way you do about Saquon Barkley, basically. It's like a lot of people concerned about him. A lot of people have some concerns, obvious reasons, but I'll take it at their ADP.
Those Penn State running backs. I actually saw both Saquon and Sanders play at Penn State. That's quite. They were both
pretty awesome.
And Gesicki was there too. They were awesome. All right, I feel like this running back spot of the draft, I should say, is so fruitful this year because even the players I'm not as passionate about, they look pretty darn good. You know, we got players like Damien Harris who scored 15 touchdowns but is getting underhyped compared to Ramondre Stevenson now sitting there as well. Like, okay, like touchdown regression, but he's RB 33 in some drafts. James Cook, a 2nd round pick. You know, if you want to say this guy Savoca is an idiot, I'm going with the cheaper Bills player who's going to outpace him because he's a 2nd round pick and they're going to use him. I buy that argument. Melvin Gordon, even, you know, Lepre has been banging the drum for Melvin Gordon over Javonte Williams. He's got his believers, including Gordon himself, who I think he kind of complained publicly about them wanting Javonte to be the guy to get them to cut it out and give him more opportunities. We'll see if it plays out. He was not bad when he was on the field last year.
He was actually pretty good.
So that's my only big concern about Javonte Williams, why he didn't make it into anything further than the honorable mention. But, man, get a few from this outside the RB dead zone area this year. You're going to be just fine.
The reason I think you could, and I think honorable mention on Javonte Williams is totally reasonable, but the reason I think you could put him in the, you know, guys you really want to get is because he still finished as the RB 18 last year, despite being on a bottom 10 offense.
It's hard to do. You have to be efficient. You have to be good.
Well, and not just that, Melvin Gordon was RB 17. So you've got a split backfield, a bottom 10 offense, and you're still a top 20 RB with Drew Lock and Teddy Bridgewater as your quarterbacks with no offense to speak of, one of the lowest red zone conversion rates in the league. Like, that seems crazy that they finished 17 and 18 on such a bad offense.
Now, I will say, I think one assertion you can make is that touchdown equity increases for one player between Javonte and Melvin Gordon, but probably not both. And reception opportunity decreases overall when you don't have Teddy Bridgewater and Drew Lock dumping it off all the time.
Sure. Drew Lock, though, has one of the highest deep ball rates in the league every year, though.
You know what? That's true. As I said, I was like, Lock loves to chuck it.
He just can't hit him.
Yeah.
He just can't make it. That's the problem.
Oh, DK Metcalf. Good luck, man. Mr. Spare Yards this year.
Yeah, it's gonna be and Russell Wilson, legitimately, like, over the last decade, you could argue he's the best deep ball passer in the league. Like, if you go back and look at the stats, you could argue he is the best deep ball passer in football. I like your point on Damien Harris. I think it is similar to a lot of these other running backs we talk about. There's just a lot of questions surrounding them, you know, and then it's like Ramondre Stevenson's going to be the James White guy. And then it's These guys are all 3 down guys or whatever. But Damien Harris's opportunities at the goal line last year were immense. And if you've been following along in camp for the New England Patriots, Mac Jones hasn't looked particularly good either. But the big concern there is the offensive line has looked even worse. So I don't – that is actually a concern to me. Like, if this offensive line – and I know it's summer and it's preseason, but this has been like an ongoing thing. I don't know. The offensive line has been an extensive issue throughout the entire summer and into these joint practices, Matt, and in training or preseason, all of that.
One might say they were one of the biggest overperformers of the 2021 season. Maybe there's some natural regression. Just Mac Jones put in a good situation. The defense plays better than expected. Now they have a tougher schedule. This offensive line feels a little overwhelmed. Maybe they regress towards the middle of the pack a little bit. And yeah, producer Phil is saying in the chat that Belichick is extremely finicky. One fumble and he could be out for 2 games. But I will say this. I think there's some very rational draft position here for a player with this many, quote unquote warts on his profile. You're talking about sometimes falling outside the top 35 running backs in drafts for a player who scored 15 times last year. Talk about ADP improving over the course of time and players just getting smarter in this game. It's a good sign of it, but still, sign me up at essentially free. I've seen him go players like Brian Robinson, who got hype out of Washington, but might be the number 2 or number 3 back on a team that's not expected to be very good, or pure handcuffs like Alexander Madison, Rashad White. I realize the upside you're chasing there at that point in the draft, but if you want a contributor at that point, a final flex play in a pinch, go for it. It's going to be fine.
If you guys haven't subscribed yet to the podcast, left a review, rating, all that stuff, only takes a second. Greatly appreciate it. If you like this type of stuff, you listen on YouTube, thumbs up, subscribe, leave a comment, all that. We read, respond to all of them. It's a community around this way. One more guy I have, and then let's talk about a couple guys that we're looking to avoid. This is one that Nick Lepre, notorious fantasy colleague of ours, hates, and I like him quite a bit. And his name is Tony Pollard. And I'm going to tell you exactly why. Number 1, Tony Pollard is better than Ezekiel Elliott. Now, you may say, what are you talking about, Lafayette? Well, it's just common sense at this point. By every single metric last season, every metric, you couldn't find a single metric that Tony Pollard wasn't considerably better than Ezekiel Elliott. Now, if you want to say Zeke was dealing with the PCL, fine. Do you know that Zeke had more carries in his rookie season than Tony Pollard has for his entire career? Come on.
Insane stat.
Come on, right? Like,
talk about tread on the tires, a difference between the two.
Yeah, he's got like 1,300 total carries. Or so. Actually, it might be more than that. Is it? I think it's more than that. It's got to be more than that, as a matter of fact. Ezekiel Elliott is still, I'm not going to say he's washed, right? I don't want to say he's got nothing left in the tank. 1,650 total carries. Pollard's in like the 312, I think. But last year, Pollard had 8 more forced missed tackles than Zeke, like 100 and something fewer carries. He was top 3 among all running backs in yards per route run. Beat him in yards per reception, yards per route run. Elusiveness, he was top 8 at his position. He was second in yards per attempt. And that's only because Rashaad Penny was first. So if you want to consider him not qualified, you could do that as well. And you could put Tony Pollard number 1. And now, and I talked about this in a video the other day, they're talking about lining Pollard up in the slot as well. If this guy's getting a Cordero Patterson type role, which is entirely possible, like 9 carries per game, 6 targets, 7. Remember, Amari Cooper's gone. Mm-hmm. So you've got Michael Gallup returning from an injury. You have CeeDee Lamb. And then you got a rookie that's come in and considered the starter, but we still don't know. Tony Pollard could be a smash in the 8th round, an absolute smash. I don't think he needs to be the number one guy over Zeke. I don't think he needs to get all the goal line carries. If he's someone that, to me, Matt, I'm rambling, but let me just put it to you this way. It seems to me that Dak Prescott and Mike McCarthy and the coaching staff are all going, and you know what? Maybe even Jerry Jones watching from above with the bird's eye view might be saying, all right, well, Zeke's on a huge contract, but this Tony Pollard guy's pretty good. Can we maybe figure out a way to get him a lot of work this season without making it look like we're throwing away millions and millions of dollars with Zeke by not getting him work too?
That would be more routes run. And they kind of figured it out over the course of the 2021 season. Week 9, he gets 15 routes run, which was 5 more than he had done all season long. And then he never fell below double digits in routes run except for 2 other times. And that corresponds with him playing better within the offense. So the slot, or like sort of this hybrid role, Cordero Patterson role, makes a lot of sense to kind of appease all parties here. I hope that happens. And here's the best part about Tony Pollard. You can bet on the efficiency of the player without spending a ton of high draft capital, and hopefully that slot position helps alleviate the fact that Tyron Smith is essentially out for the year, because that offensive line just took a big dip. I saw it around the industry.
That's a problem for sure.
It moved from like above average to like significantly below average with that one loss of player for the year. That scares me even more for a between the tackles runner like Zeke.
Right.
So Tony Pollard, I think, is a fine bet. I'm a little bit scared. I'm a little bit scared of that team now. I think the Eagles did essentially everything right to try to catch them in that division, and the Cowboys kind of got rid of a bunch of talent and look worse in some of their areas of strength. They're probably not going to have the same amount of takeaways they had last year on defense. I think the Eagles win this division. I know you hate them sometimes, but I think they look like a team that overtakes that number one expected team in the Cowboys.
You think the Eagles are?
I think they win the division.
Why would I hate you saying that?
You got like a love-hate relationship with the Eagles. Like they've burned you enough that you can't be optimistic.
Eternal pessimist is what I like to call it. No, but I think that's a really good point. Not to belabor it, but yeah, losing Smith. By the way, they said like the hamstring came off the bone.
Gross sounding.
Just an awful sounding injury, right? Yeah. Like, oh yeah, they got to go in there and reattach it to his bone.
God,
shit. But that's a good point. When your offensive line is banged up, what do you have to do? Either you're bouncing it outside, or you're getting creative, or you're getting rid of the ball quickly. Zeke can still catch passes. He was still targeted, 65 times last year. He had 287 and 2, and we've seen some decent receiving seasons from him. But Tony Pollard seems like he's the more dynamic player that can do a whole lot more if the offensive line is going to be an issue. So, yeah, I think you have a diverse skill set there. I'm willing to take the chances, but I agree that to your point that anytime you lose a key offensive lineman like that, it's not good.
Let me go off script a little bit and talk about one of my other flag plant plays at another position.
Sure.
Because I think it correlates specifically to this idea. So Dak Prescott, another year removed from that terrible injury himself in 2020. They already said they're going to add scrambling back in to the game plan a little bit more, or design QB rushes. But with the offensive line getting worse, significantly worse with this injury, you're going to see the coaches encourage Dak Prescott to get the ball out quickly. That benefits players like Tony Pollard, but I believe it also benefits Dalton Schultz. Dalton Schultz, the tight end for this team, is the receiver 2 for this team outside of CeeDee Lamb. And he's going to be expected to get a significant amount of the target share every single week. I think 130 targets is far from outside the range of outcomes for this player. If you just look at the expected fantasy point totem pole for each team, this is one of the highest ranking tight ends in the league. He looks like a Mark Andrews or a Travis Kelce in that regard. I don't think he's as good of a player on a per touch basis or per opportunity basis, but the opportunity is going to be there in droves for one of the better offenses in the league. What are their odds, by the way, to be the highest scoring offense in the NFL? I'm sure it's not that bad for Dallas.
No, it can't be. I'm sure they've dropped a little bit since the injury, but they're 16-1, but that's top 9 in the league.
Yeah, so
Actually
top 10
tied with the
offense.
Broncos and Colts, so that's seventh in the league. Still
Top-
above the Eagles.
Yeah, interesting. It might be a little inefficiency there that we could take advantage of, but still, just going with expectations like we would to balance and project out opportunity. Dalton Schultz looks like he's in a fantastic position on an upper tier offense. That's the thing we want to chase with these mid-round tight ends, because otherwise I'm just waiting on the position. He's the end of the don't wait on tight end tier for me. And I honestly kind of like him more than Kittle and Waller in a season-long standpoint, because I think the consistency will be there.
Is there anybody that you're just at all costs staying away from? And let me preface this with at their ADP.
Now, just the tight end position, or
No, if you're just looking across the board, maybe some early round picks or some mid round picks, because Dameon Pierce, I know we've already talked about this, is one of those guys that you're at his ADP you're avoiding. I'm sure if he popped up in the 9th somewhere, somehow you'd be like, okay, I'll take Dameon Pierce. But are there any players that you look at and you go, you know, I don't buy the hype, or I don't know why they're being drafted there, or even look, there's a million other guys in the same range that I'd rather have, and I can do without getting this guy in any of my leagues.
I have 0 Justin Fields across best ball, across season-long leagues. Actually, I have 1 dynasty team where he's my QB4. I'll deal with it. Justin Fields. I hope I'm wrong here, because I liked him as a prospect coming out, number 2 pick, obviously. But this Bears receiving core looks depleted beyond belief. This offensive line is bottom 3 in the league. He's not going to be able to get rid of the ball. He's not going to be able to scramble, because Matt Kajeski, our preseason and NCAA analyst, says that they've consistently not utilized Justin Fields' athleticism at both Ohio State and in the pros so far. Yeah, maybe he's running for his life, and so he ends up with some rushing yards, but I see almost no way this team has upper tier efficiency this year. There are always players below him that I feel like can have as good of a fantasy season, and maybe the rushing upside is eluding me, but I don't think so. I just don't think it's there like people think it is, because he ran a fast 40-yard dash at the combine.
Is there anyone in the past handful of years that you remember the fantasy community just latching onto to the point where just almost obsessive than Justin Fields?
I don't even get it this time. Okay, I'll give you one name. Terrell Pryor. When he switched from quarterback to wide receiver for the Browns, and then he went off the second half of the season, and then he went to Washington and became a 4th-round fantasy pick. I have never seen the fantasy community more aligned with this dude is the next Calvin Johnson than the Terrell Pryor hype.
I forgot about that. Was he really going in the 4th?
He was going in the mid-4th round of fantasy drafts. Like he was going to be the number 1 guy for Washington. He had like a sick one-handed catch early in training camp that went absolutely viral too.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah. It's like, you're going to see a lot of this. 4th. Well, no, we didn't.
That happens a lot, though, man. That happens a lot. Whenever there's just an insanely strong consensus on a player, you know, it either means that you could be getting really good value on them, or there's just 0 meat left on the bone. And I think with some of these guys, to me, it's not even as much as I would say because I'll draft anyone at the right spot, or I'm avoiding. But it's more so like, as you know, with Aaron Jones, do I want Aaron Jones in the middle of the 2nd, or do I want AJ Dillon in the middle of the 6th or later in some leagues, depending on where you're drafting him? I'll take AJ Dillon in the middle of the 6th. Matt LaFleur just came out and said these are my 1A and 1A running backs. I'm not misquoting that. That's what he said, meaning the same guy in terms of volume. And AJ Dillon catches passes too. The one guy that I just want nothing to do with, though, is DK Metcalf, 49th overall. It's so tough. And you know what? Maybe Geno Smith figures it out, and maybe Maybe they got it. They can make it work. But without, and you kind of alluded to this earlier in the show, without that elite deep ball presence, deep ball thrower in Russell Wilson, I just honestly don't see how you're ever going to get any of those, DK Metcalf just won your week type of games. And usually with Wilson, you're going to get 3 or 4 of them every year. And then the other games, he at least has, strong touchdown equity, can rack up the 100-yard performances, can give you the 50-yard touchdown. I don't see how any of that materializes this year. And for that reason, 5th round, 4th round, I'm out on DK Metcalf.
Top 20 in fantasy points per game, even with Wilson missing time and not playing very well when he came back. Top 10 in target share, top 10 in air yard share, top 25 in expected fantasy points per game. He's just not repeating it. Now, I will say, looking at previous year opportunity and then saying where does he fall in drafts comparatively, it can often help you find value. The guy's going at wide receiver 30 right now in drafts. And honestly, I just kind of agree with you in the sense that you still need targets to be accurate. And his target quality rating was top 25 in the NFL. And if you look at the Broncos from last year and their target quality ratings, they're outside the top 80. And I unfortunately think that that's what's in store for Metcalf. He kind of looks like a value, though. I will say, when you just compare the numbers to the ADP-based expectations, I just am always looking for more certainty and more upside there. And I'm often looking running back at that very spot of the draft as well.
And you still have Tyler Lockett in Seattle, too.
Right.
It's not like a Brandon Cook situation where the only guys behind them are players that your casual NFL fans literally never heard of.
Yeah.
Right? So, anybody else you got before we head out?
In the do not draft category, man, this hurts to say. We've jumped the shark with rookie wide receivers, especially in the mid tiers. I'm not saying none of them are going to hit because I'll look foolish at the end of the year. These rookie wide receivers are more prime,
especially in recent seasons, right? With all these rookies hitting.
Yeah, they hit early now. The bottom line is, if you look at historical hit rates, they take time. Second, third-year players break out at the same rate as first-year players. But the recency bias, the new shiny toy bias, makes these players very intriguing in drafts. And Drake London especially, I'm looking at best ball ADP a ton these days, but he's injured still. They say he's coming back. He's still going inside the top 75 picks. This is the earliest we've taken these core of first-round wide receivers collectively ever in best ball drafts. And while I'll take some shots in tournaments there, I do not need to make that kind of bet inside the top 75 picks in my redraft league. I'm leaving too much expected value on the table there. So Drake London in an offense that's also expected to be bottom tier in the NFL. Sorry, bud, I'm out.
Let me ask you a question. How much has the landscape changed in terms of drafting rookie wide receivers in fantasy leagues? Like, where was Justin Jefferson drafted? Where was Justin Jefferson drafted as a rookie in standard or in redraft leagues?
I don't have the information directly pulled
but
up.
You have an idea, right?
It was like the very end.
That's what I thought. I thought in some leagues he was undrafted.
Undrafted. AJ Brown, same thing. Like, he was a first week waiver wire pickup kind of
player.
Right. Like Garrett Wilson and Jahan Dotson level. That is where rookie wide receivers used to hang out.
Yeah, exactly right. Now, like Jamar Chase last year, 4th, 5th round. Kyle
Pitts.
It worked. Yeah, sure. Listen, I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm saying, you remember a decade ago, or more, around a decade ago, maybe a little before that, quarterbacks were being drafted in the first round steadily. Granted, you weren't getting as many, like a lot of them were standard leagues, but still, I don't know. It changes. And to your point, the pendulum might have swung so far in the other direction that we need to see things balance out a little bit before we start going crazy, especially when you consider the situations that a lot of these players were in. I mean, AJ Brown came onto a team. Who was the competition that year at wide receiver? What?
Corey Davis. And he had Marcus Mariota as quarterback, so no one thought he could support 2.
Right. Justin Jefferson at least had a good quarterback, and outside of Adam Thielen, who were the other pass catchers there? So I don't know. I think the situation is obviously really important. Maybe Marcus Mariota does it for Drake London as well. But I do agree that, like, what about Chris Olave, where you have Jarvis Landry, you have Michael Thomas, you have a pass-catching back in Alvin Kamara?
So now you're getting down to wide receiver 44, 45. The expected fantasy points for that position in the draft, 7.5 points versus the 9 to 9.5. This is half PPR fantasy points expectation for where Drake London is going. That 2.5 fantasy points per game difference is tough. That's like, it's 0.5 touchdowns. That's a ton of opportunity. Sure. So the opportunity cost starts to even out there. Players like Chris Olave, even Sky Moore, although I like MVS in that Kansas City offense better, and he goes at the same place. George Pickens, even. Now we're talking about fine bets. That's fine. But that's really the limit here, guys. Unless you're hearing this guy's a freak of nature, we should save our 5th, 6th, 7th round rookie wide receiver picks for your Jalen Waddles, your Jamar Chases, your top 10 picks with clear opportunity. Not wishy-washy, amorphous opportunity.
I love it. Hey, over on the Odd Shopper channel, all the betting content you want for preseason, another clean sweep yesterday. We're rolling, baby. But also regular season, all of that good stuff. Baseball, right? We have WNBA. My point is, if you're looking for betting content, and I think the best free betting content that you're going to find, I don't say that because I'm biased, although I am. Our analysts are fantastic. Check it all out. Check out everything else here on the channel. Matt's been putting out incredible content. Nick, I've been putting stuff out there. Our DFS channel, we got you covered. You can find Matt at Draftaholic on Twitter, me at Laffy_D. And hey, have a good weekend. See you back here next one.
Peace. Gotcha.